Aloha, I'm Ray Vera, President and CEO of Hawaii Pacific Health. As you know, Governor Ige recently announced that on October 15th, travelers will be able to come to our state by taking a 72-hour pre-travel test, and that would allow them to waive a 14-day quarantine that Hawaii has currently been subject to. There's also been a lot of talk about whether or not there should be a second test upon arrival or maybe even a third test. And I think we would all agree that in a perfect world, with unlimited resources, the more testing that we could do for inbound travelers as well as for the community at large, that would add additional layers of protection. But the reality of it is we don't have unlimited resources. We have limited testing capacity, and right now the cost of those tests can be somewhat prohibitive. And so from our perspective, the 72-hour pre-travel test program is the right process at the right time as we begin to think about reopening the economy of our state through broadening the arrivals who aren't subject to a quarantine. And so one of the things I think that we constantly need to be reminded of is that there is no separation of the public health of our community and the economy within our state. The fact is they're completely intertwined. The future of our economy here in Hawaii is reliant on our ability to have a strong public health infrastructure that as we continue to stimulate the growth, we also are able to manage and keep our people of Hawaii safe. Now, what does that mean? That means we've got to all accept and learn to live with the virus present. Further, the way that we do that is adding layers of risk mitigation as they become available so that it becomes a livable and economically sustainable community that we call home. Now, how do we do that? Well, again, I think we gradually reopen the economy by lifting restrictions and doing a couple of things. One is deploying a world-class public health care infrastructure. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that we do appropriate surveillance to test the rate of spread in our community, much like Lieutenant Governor Green recently mentioned in the press conference around doing random tests using the surge testing kits that we have available here in the state. Second is that we continue to have a strategic testing plan, one of which is the pre-travel testing. The other is testing the symptomatic population in our community. And third, of course, doing the random surveillance. And I think we all hope that in the future, we will be able to do broader testing throughout the community as more rapid tests become available and the cost of those tests become more affordable. Next, we also need to make sure that we're doing appropriate contact tracing and making sure that we're doing a broader disease investigation as we've learned with epidemiologists, first contact resources, and the contact tracers themselves. One of the most critical factors in this, though, is that we as a community support that effort. And so when we get a call or when people are contacted, they're willing to share information that will enable that contact tracing process to work. And then, of course, we also need to make sure that as a state, we have the ability to quarantine and isolate as necessary for our most vulnerable populations or anyone else who may need those quarantine or isolation resources. And lastly, we all have a personal responsibility. We've got to do our part if we're truly going to be able to live with this virus in the future. And so what does that mean? It's the same things that you've heard before. Most importantly, we all must wear a mask. We all must be disciplined in the way that we social distance, in the way that we gather. We've got to wash our hands. We've got to stay home when we're sick. Even as recent as just this last week, we heard Dr. Fauci in conversation with Lieutenant Governor Green tell us there is no perfect solution, but to the extent we can put layers of risk mitigation in place, the better off we will be, understanding that there is no perfect solution. Look, I believe as a community we can do this if we all do our part. So please join us, do your part, and we'll look forward to a living experience that we all have known and loved in the past. Aloha.